Should you eat a bedtime snack for blood sugar after 60? You've probably gotten a different answer every time you asked. Your neighbor swears by cheese and crackers. An article said a hard-boiled egg. Someone else told you that eating after 7 at night is the whole problem. And every one of those answers is confident. Here's what almost nobody says. That question is actually two questions wearing the same coat, and they have very different answers. One of them is, will a snack bring my morning number down? 16 studies have looked at that, and what they found is not what the advice assumes. The other one is, will a snack keep me from dropping too low while I'm asleep? That one is real. It's just real for a much smaller group of people than the advice suggests, and if you're in that group, you may not know it yet. So let's take them one at a time, because the answer for you depends entirely on which of those two nights you're actually having. And by the end, you'll know how to tell, using a piece of paper and a meter you already own, what a bedtime snack is actually supposed to do. The bedtime snack was never really designed to bring your morning number down. It was designed to hold a floor underneath it, which sounds like the same job and is very nearly the opposite one. Think about what your body does between your last bite and your first cup of coffee. That's 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours with nothing coming in, and your brain still needs a steady supply of sugar in your blood the whole time, so your liver handles it. It keeps a store of glucose on hand and releases it slowly through the night, topping up the supply so the level never falls too far. For most people, that runs quietly and you never think about it once. The bedtime snack assumes that system runs short. Add a little food before bed, the thinking goes, and you give the body something to work with so it doesn't have to reach so deep. That logic gets stronger after 60, and for a real reason. More older adults are on medications that actively push blood sugar downward, and the longer someone has lived with diabetes, the more the body's own emergency response to a falling number can get quieter, which means a drop that would have woken you up at 50 might not wake you at 70. The snack question genuinely does change with age, just not in the direction most people assume it does. And so the advice went out. What the American Diabetes Association's guidance actually says, as of 2024, is to combine fiber-rich carbohydrate with protein and a little fat, and to build that plan with your own clinician instead of applying it to everyone. Notice the part that keeps falling off. Build it with your clinician. By the time the advice reaches the kitchen counter, it's just cheese and crackers. So which of those two jobs is your snack actually doing? The rebound story, and what the monitors found. For most of the last century, there was one famous explanation for a high morning number, and it went like this. Sometime around 2 or 3 in the morning, your blood sugar quietly falls too low. You sleep through it. Your body treats that drop as an emergency and floods your system with hormones that tell the liver to release sugar fast. By the time you wake up and test, the number is high. So the morning reading isn't a true high. It's a bounce-back high, what's left over after a low. That idea has a name. It's called the Somogyi effect, after the researcher who proposed it. And if you've ever been told your morning number is a rebound, this is where that came from. It's a genuinely good story. It explains the number, it explains the poor sleep, and it hands you an obvious fix. Eat something before bed. Prevent the low. Prevent the rebound. Then the monitors arrived. A continuous glucose monitor is a small sensor worn under the skin that reads your glucose every few minutes, all night, without waking you. For the first time, researchers could watch the whole overnight curve instead of guessing at it from 2 finger sticks. And the curve didn't do what the story said. A study that went back over continuous monitoring records in people with type 2 diabetes, published in the International Journal of Endocrinology in 2022, found no support for the Somogyi effect. Comparing nights that did include a low against nights that didn't, morning glucose came out lower after the low nights. Lower, which is the exact opposite of what a rebound predicts. Whatever was raising those morning numbers, it wasn't a rebound. So what is lifting the number instead? Mostly something that has nothing to do with food. In the hours before you wake, your body runs a scheduled hormone release, cortisol and growth hormone among them, that tells the liver to push glucose out so you have fuel to get up and move. That's the dawn phenomenon, and the clinical definition is precise on the point that matters here. A morning rise that happens without any low before it. No low required, because the whole thing runs on a timer. The American Diabetes Association, citing diabetes care research, puts it at roughly 30% of people with pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, where the body works harder than it used to just to hold blood sugar in range, and at over half of everyone living with diabetes. And it doesn't fade with age. A diabetes care study of 81 people who had type 2 diabetes and weren't using insulin split them by age, 70 and over, 60 to 69, and 59 and under, and found the pattern in all three groups, which reframes the whole snack question. A snack can't argue with a hormone. That's the theory anyway. Researchers went and tested it on people. What happened when they actually tested the snack? In 2022, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published a systematic review that pulled together 16 separate intervention studies on bedtime snacks in people with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. A systematic review isn't one more study. It's researchers gathering every study already done on a question, judging the quality of each, and reporting what the whole body of work says instead of what one trial says. Their finding: no consistent relationship between eating a bedtime snack and better blood sugar control. And it came through most clearly in the studies that had bothered to include a no-snack control group. When someone actually compared the snack against skipping the snack, the advantage stopped showing up. The authors said out loud what that means. Current bedtime snack recommendations lack robust evidence, and the studies behind them often used no snack comparison at all, or a snack too artificial to translate into a real kitchen. One trial gets quoted more than all the others put together, and it's usually quoted half. Published in Clinical Nutrition in 2020, it took 15 adults with type 2 diabetes and ran each of them through 3 conditions, 3 days apiece, with the calories matched. One condition was an egg-based low-carbohydrate bedtime snack. One was a yogurt-based snack with a higher carbohydrate load but the same protein. And one was no bedtime snack at all. The egg won against the yogurt, cleanly. Lower fasting glucose the next morning, lower fasting insulin, lower overnight glucose on the monitor. That's the half everybody quotes. Here's the other half. Neither snack lowered fasting glucose compared to the days with no bedtime snack. So the type of snack mattered. Having one at all didn't. That was 15 people, which is a small trial and a real limit on what it can tell you. But it lands where the review of all 16 studies landed, and when a small trial and a big review agree, that's worth more than either alone. There's one more thread in that review, about a spoonful of cornstarch before bed. 4 studies tested it, and across those 4, a low dose did better for overnight and fasting glucose than a high dose. 4 studies is a direction, not a recommendation, and there's no dose in there anyone could responsibly hand you. Not the food then, the hour. The hour your body handles food worst. It's 20 to 10 at night. Same kitchen, same person, same plate of food you'd have eaten at 6 without a second thought. Except you're not the same body you were at 6. As the light goes down, your system starts releasing melatonin, the hormone that tells your body night has arrived. Most people know it as the thing that makes you sleepy. It does something else too. It quiets the cells in your pancreas that release insulin, and insulin is the thing that takes the sugar from a meal and puts it where it belongs. So food arriving at 10 at night walks into a body that has already started closing up. Researchers tested that directly in the biggest trial anywhere in this discussion, a randomized crossover trial published in Diabetes Care in 2022 took 845 adults and gave each of them the same meal twice, once early and once late, timed against that person's own bedtime, rather than against a clock on the wall. In the late condition, melatonin ran 3.5 times higher. The late meal produced 6.7% less insulin released and 8.3% more glucose left circulating, compared to the identical meal eaten earlier. Same food, same person, same calories, just a later hour. That average is hiding something, and it's fairer to you if I open it up. The effect was strongest in people carrying a common variation in the melatonin receptor gene, roughly half of everyone. For the other half, it was weaker, and it still pointed the same way. So this isn't a coin flip between applies to me and doesn't. It's a big push or a small one, and you'd need a genetic test. Almost nobody has had to know which. Either way, the late hour is the part worth moving. An earlier randomized crossover study in clinical nutrition in 2018 found the same direction, and that replication is much of why the 2022 result is worth trusting. A smaller study in nutrients in 2021 moved 12 healthy adults from a 9 o'clock dinner to a 6 o'clock dinner and saw better glucose behavior across the following 24 hours. That one was 12 people, and none of them had diabetes, so hold it loosely. Everything to this point says the bedtime snack doesn't do the job it's sold for. There's a second job it does do, and for a real group of older adults, that one isn't optional at all. The one group this snack is genuinely for. Now the second question. Will a snack keep me from dropping too low overnight? For some people, yes. And for those people, this stops being a blood sugar optimization question and becomes a safety one. The American Diabetes Association's Standards of Care, in its 2026 section on older adults, is direct about it. Older adults with diabetes carry a greater risk of low blood sugar, especially on insulin or on a sulfonylurea. A sulfonylurea is an older class of pill that works by pushing your pancreas to release more insulin, whether or not there's food coming. And taking insulin together with a sulfonylurea raises that risk further still. Then there's the figure I keep coming back to. HypoAge, which the Journal of the American Geriatric Society ran in 2023, put continuous glucose monitors on older adults being treated with insulin for type 2 diabetes. It found that 65.2% of them had overnight lows. Only 37.6% had a low that their own fingerstick testing ever confirmed. Look at the gap between those two numbers. Roughly 2/3 of that group were dropping low at night. A little over a third knew. That's not a failure of anyone's diligence. It's that a meter reading at bedtime and a meter reading at breakfast simply cannot see 3 in the morning. And it isn't only the insulin group. Researchers presented findings at the American Diabetes Association's 2023 scientific sessions from continuous monitoring of 282 adults with type 2 diabetes at an average age of 84. Only 32% were on insulin or a sulfonylurea, which leaves most of that group carrying none of the usual warning labels. Low blood sugar showed up in that group anyway, clustered overnight, with the typical person spending 5.1% of their time below 70 milligrams per deciliter. That was a conference presentation rather than a full published paper, so it carries less weight than HypoAge. But it's the same picture. For exactly this situation, the guidelines do support a snack. The Standards of Care section on hypoglycemia backs an individualized bedtime snack where it's specifically needed to prevent overnight lows. Individualized being the operative word. But if that's you, the snack is the smaller half of the answer. The bigger half is a conversation. The same guidelines recommend reducing or switching medications that cause lows for older adults at high risk, and they name the longer-acting sulfonylurea glyburide as one to avoid in older adults, with a shorter-acting one like glipizide preferred if one is used at all. I'm not telling you to change anything. I'm telling you those are the words to bring into the room. So which of the two are you? How to tell which night you're having? That's a fair thing to ask, since nobody hands you the answer with your prescription. It costs nothing to find out, and you already own the equipment. For the next 7 nights, write down 2 numbers, what your meter says right before you go to bed, and what it says when you wake up. Same paper, 2 columns, 7 rows. Add 1 more column if you'll keep it up. The time you finished eating. Not what you ate. What time you stopped. That's the column that turns 7 readings into something a doctor can read, because it shows whether your higher mornings follow your later nights. Then look at the shape. If your bedtime number is reasonable and your morning number is consistently higher, night after night, with nothing unusual in between, that fits the dawn phenomenon. It's your liver running its morning schedule. Food before bed isn't driving it, and a snack isn't what will change it. If the mornings are high, but the nights are rough, waking around 3 feeling strange, night sweats, a headache on waking, unusually vivid dreams, that combination is worth a conversation. Especially if you're on insulin or one of those pills. The paper method has the same blind spot that opened up the hypoage gap, the one where 65.2% were dropping low and only 37.6% ever caught it. 2 finger sticks cannot see the middle of the night. They tell you which conversation to have. They don't settle it. What settles it is a continuous monitor, and that's a request your doctor can act on far more easily when you walk in with 7 nights already written down. One thing not to do. Don't start setting a 2 a.m. alarm to test yourself. That sounds sensible, and it costs you sleep, and poor sleep raises morning glucose on its own. Ask first, then test if you're told to. And whatever those 7 nights end up showing you, plenty of you are going to eat something before bed anyway, because that's a habit and not a decision. If you're going to eat something anyway, good. Let's make it the version that costs you the least. 3 moves. First, move it earlier instead of removing it. The melatonin finding wasn't about a number on a clock. It was measured against each person's own bedtime, which is why never eat after 7 is the wrong rule. Someone who goes to bed at 9 and someone who goes to bed at midnight are in completely different situations at 7 p.m. What was actually measured says put a couple of hours between your last bite and lying down. If your snack is at 10 and you're in bed at 11, pulling it to 8:30 does more than swapping what's on the plate. Second, if you're eating inside that window anyway, then what's on the plate is the one place with a measured direction. The low-carbohydrate protein option beat the higher carbohydrate one in the trial we walked through. 1 large hard-boiled egg carries about 6.3 grams of protein and about 0.56 grams of carbohydrate. And that shape is the one that didn't push overnight glucose up. In a real kitchen at a real hour, that's 1 boiled egg you cooked on Sunday and left in the fridge. The walnuts and the plain cottage cheese in your door aren't the tested food, but they're the same shape, protein and fat, very little starch, nothing to cook, nothing to shop for. And notice what isn't on that list. The crackers, the toast, the bowl of cereal, the glass of juice you take your pills with. Those sit on the other side of the line, the higher carbohydrate side, which is the side that lost. Third, and this is the one that gets skipped, move a little after you eat. A meta-analysis in sports medicine in 2022, pooling 8 randomized trials and 116 participants, found that walking after a meal blunted the rise more than walking before it and more than sitting still, with the strongest effect when you got up within the first 30 minutes. In older adults specifically, a diabetes care trial of 10 inactive adults aged 60 and over found the walk after the evening meal did more than a long walk earlier in the day. That one was only 10 people, so don't lean on it on its own, though it sits comfortably alongside the meta-analysis. 10 minutes of dishes and a slow lap of the house counts, and nobody needs a track for it. Which puts the plate last of the 3. The hour you eat matters more than what's on it, and getting up afterward matters more than either. None of that requires you to give anything up tonight. Nothing in this video is a reason to change, reduce, delay, or stop any medication you're taking. If you're on insulin or a sulfonylurea and what you heard about overnight lows sounded familiar, that's not a snack decision, it's an appointment. Bring the words with you. Overnight lows, continuous monitoring, and whether your current medication is still the right one for your age. So, 2 questions. Will a bedtime snack lower your morning number? For most people over 60, the evidence says no, and the story that promised it would didn't survive the monitors. Will it protect you from dropping too low overnight? For a specific group it will, and that group is bigger and quieter than most people realize. That's why one answer for everybody fails. Hand out the snack, and most people get a habit that does nothing for the number they're watching, at the hour their body handles food worst, while the ones who genuinely need it never find out they're in that group. 2 different problems, wearing the same high morning reading. Here's your one thing tonight. When you finish dinner and clear the table, put a pen and a piece of paper next to your meter. Bedtime number, morning number, 7 nights. That's it. 7 lines in your own handwriting, and you'll know which of the 2 questions is yours. Come back in a week and tell me which of the 2 shapes you got. Not the numbers, just the shape. Seeing how that splits across a few hundred of you would be useful to all of us. If you want that sheet already laid out, with the questions to take to your appointment printed underneath it, that's the free action guide. Links below and in the pinned comment. And next time we'll look at the other half of that overnight window, the one nobody measures, what your sleep itself is doing to the number before your liver ever gets involved.